So I recently joined Chalmers University of Technology, and I will soon move with my department, the Applied Information Technology at Gothenburg University. I was invited to present briefly my research, so I decided to really present what I'm currently doing. As you see from the title, I will bring you back to the discussion we had yesterday about sharing economy. Why do I do that? Because I believe that except of the technological innovation that we discussed so thoroughly today, it is important to understand the economic implications, especially for traditional businesses that they are challenged by disruptors like the digital platforms and in particular sharing economy platforms. So, what I will try to show here briefly is what is different when we talk about sharing economy, and then what is changing fundamentally in the economic system. With the sharing economy, we have some new trends. We have the so-called access-based consumption. What does this mean? It means that the traditional ways of generating value are not applicable anymore. People are not interested at buying products. They're interested at renting products, right? This affects dramatically the way that companies can generate value. And then we have the so-called peer-to-peer transactions. What does this mean? It means that consumers and suppliers are interchangeable. So we don't have clear distinction between what is a consumer and what is a supplier in this environment, in these digital platforms. Why is this important? Because it affects the way we view the supply chain. Something else is that, of course, individuals are using idle resources, are sharing them. However, these activities are happening casually, which means that there is no persistent way of interacting with participants in these platforms. And this implies a very different way, again, of generating value. You have to keep them busy. So it's not good enough to have a critical mass of users, which is something that it's allowed by digitization because it enables scalability. It's important to keep them active. It's important to keep them active so you can continue generating value. So we have this type of platforms that somehow are supposed to intermediate, they are supposed to matchmake and be gatekeepers by using algorithm, user-generated data, in order to what? Lower transaction cost, solve problems of information asymmetries, and build trust among the participants. This is a traditional view of seeing these businesses, assuming that they are there to achieve cost efficiencies. I will argue in a couple of minutes that this is not enough. These companies are more than passive intermediaries. They do something that it's important for other businesses to consider, especially now that we have to think about platforms, right? So, how do traditional businesses react to that? Sometimes they acquire such businesses. Sometimes they collaborate. Sometimes they are in direct competition, and maybe this is the worst case scenario, I would say, or even worse than that, is that actually to have a wait-and-see approach. Some other times, they also develop complementary products and they try somehow to innovate and create value in collaboration to these platforms. I must say that since I recently joined the university, I don't really know how traditional businesses like, for example, SAP or Volvo or other companies are actually doing here in Sweden, but it's very interesting to see that. Why? Because when we talk about digitalization, we talk about these digital platforms, and it is important to see how traditional businesses that are organized very differently are acting in this environment. What is also interesting to discuss is that somehow competition, the way that companies compete in their industry is changing. Why is this happening? Well, of course, as we mentioned also yesterday, sometimes the supply chain models are not working and the entry costs are very low. But when I discussed before and I described the way that users can be either consumers or suppliers, what I also indicated is that somehow the organizational structure behind these platforms are very different from the traditional firms. So we don't have this hierarchical structure anymore. Digitization enables a different way of interaction between consumers and suppliers, which, as I say, sometimes could be the same people. What does this mean? It means that somehow there are no clear boundaries of the organizations anymore. So it's not very clear whether a company like these platforms is a firm or a market, or if it is something in between, something that we call hybrid. And this is very important because it means that these companies are more flexible and more adaptable, and they can compete and be more aggressive than traditional businesses. Think about a traditional business which is more organized into silos. How can such a business compete when such a platform appears with very low cost, with very low coordination cost within the organization, and very easy way of transforming and reorganizing consumers and suppliers? Plus, we have new dimensions of competition, because these platforms are like living environments where actually participants compete against each other. So when you think about Uber, the drivers are competing who will get a ride, right? And sometimes, if you have also innovation within these platforms, maybe they compete with a platform owner. So now we have to deal with 3 levels of competition. And this is very, very challenging for traditional businesses that they think of their strategy in a very top-down way. These ways are not working really in this environment anymore. So what we did is that we focus, when we discuss about sharing economy, along with a group of colleagues that I will mention in a moment, in this second level of competition among the participants, and how this is organized and governed in these platforms. And we did an analysis that is actually my current research under review in a practitioner outlet, in collaboration with a colleague from Copenhagen Business School, where I actually come from, and a colleague from Aalto School in Stockholm. And what we did is that we identify 4 different models of sharing economy based on existing practical examples that somehow can help us to better understand how firms can manage these organizational fluid boundaries, right? And they can actually compete in this environment. And I will start from the right side, where we have tight control, which is one dimension, control, laws or tight, and the other one is competition. And I will start with the example of Uber that you are all familiar with, right? This example, we categorize it in a bigger model that we call the so-called franchisor. Why? Because they use digital technologies, they use algorithms, they use generated data from their customers in order to control and standardize the output that they offer. This is one way of managing and dealing with a digital platform, and this ability to marketize, something that actually Uber does pretty well, and also organize differently and coordinate your participants. Another way is something that we call the principal, and here you could see perhaps TaskRabbit or Handy, an example that we use, or all these kind of sharing economy platforms where very low effort type of tasks are shared. In this case, technology is used to monitor and control very strictly the behavior of the participants, and it's more like a contract where, of course, the participants are not employees, so it's not really an organization. It is a type of a market structure with organizational characteristics. And then if we go to the other, to the left column, we have 2 models, the Chaperon and the Gartner, where you actually see, in the first case, Airbnb, again, using a number of standardization mechanisms and using digitization to enable and somehow oversee the behavior of the participants and allow them to innovate. Innovate in personalizing and creating new services, because here the difference in the left side is that the companies are not competing for cost efficiency, they are competing for differentiation. So they want somehow their participants to come up with innovative small services to differentiate from other players. And you have also another example. How many of you are familiar with couchsurfing? How many of you have used couchsurfing? Yes. Well, it's an interesting example of one of the most traditional and, let's say, close to the definition of sharing economy platforms. Why? Because here what we see is that digitization is used to enable the community to better collaborate, and value comes from the collaboration among the different members of the community. So this is one of, let's say, the most non-business-like model from the 3. However, if I want to return to that, and relate it a little bit to the discussion we have here, the models on the right side are the models that could be easily, humans could be easily substituted by robots, right? Why? Because they are very well-defined, strict tasks that digitization allows all the information to be captured and standardized. On the left side, we have services and we have interactions among the participants that cannot be easily substituted, and human intervention will always be necessary. Why? Because here we need differentiation. Differentiation implies creativity, it implies imagination, something that, to my understanding of the 2 days that I have been here, has not been reached yet to a sufficient degree by artificial intelligence. So in this type of models, we still have opportunities for a lot of human interaction and value creation. So why did I present all these things to you? Because I do think that traditional businesses need to consider these models, maybe decide to take some of these models as a paradigm and shift towards platforms, or compete, if this is the case, with such platforms in their business environments. So what we try to do here is to kind of map some generic examples and paradigms of different models that could actually be useful. And I think that, for example, the franchisor model is something very close to what we would expect to see in the car industry, right, or transportation industry. Cepron or Gartner may be more into accommodation or other service type of industries. And, of course, the principal model when it comes to services similar to contracts. So this is it from me, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ioanna. Thank you.